Hey everyone, this is John Gravina. Welcome to another edition of Soul Science. This is episode 15, and the title of our topic today is Celebrity Baptisms. No, we are not okay without God. And we're going to start off with the very sad news. If you've been following the podcast, that I've been writing and talking about the young Dutch woman, Zariah Terbeek, who has been suffering from mental illness for quite a long number of years, although she was only 29. And euthanasia is legal in the Netherlands, and she was granted permission by the government to be euthanized for her depression. Not a perfectly healthy young woman, not in any way terminally ill or anything of that sort. This was simply mental suffering. And, I've obviously, coming from a Catholic perspective, we believe in the sanctity of life and that only God can take life, and no one has the authority to take a life into their own hands, including their own. That is straight from scriptures that our life belongs to God. So now that, of course, is the religion of Christianity, and not everyone has to go along with that, certainly, but that hasn't really been the point of my podcasts, and in fact the entire point of the website has not been, of Soul Science, has not been to hit people over the head with Christian morality. Okay, that really has not been the point. You can find that 100,000 other places, right? My point, and I think you can find it in the title, Soul Science, right? It's to talk about whether we have any empirical evidence for the benefits of religion, right? Are there health benefits to spirituality? Are there other benefits to religious practice that we can study, that we can learn about? And so that I've been really talking about the tragic case of Zariah from that point of view, right? So, at the time that we started this, she was alive. She was waiting for, to be given, I guess, I don't know how it works in the Netherlands. Perhaps the government, approves a particular date or something like that. So anyway, I believe it was May 22nd. Maybe May 21st, I'm not sure, that she was granted approval, and they went ahead with the euthanasia. And so, as has been reported by the Free Press and the New York Post and a number of other, in fact, it's been covered all over the world. And she has now been euthanized. And I'm not, the position that I have been presenting is really not, read the articles, read what's being said on social media. Lots of people agree with the position I'm taking, right? In fact, which is how sad, how tragic, what a young life. How can we give up on life so soon? Couldn't anything have been done for her, right? So that has been my point of view, and I've been making the argument that I believe that Christianity does have answers to the problems that we are facing in our society, and that maybe there was an answer for Zariah along those lines from Christianity. So that's the kind of the context in which we are discussing the issue of these celebrity baptisms and so forth, because there's a thread, it's a thread which really is a commentary and a critique of a worldview that became very popular in the 70s, that I was very familiar with since I was growing up in the 70s. This book you see up on the screen here, I'm Okay, You're Okay, this book was on my bookshelf at home growing up. So, I'm sure my parents read this book. I'm sure it was talked about a lot. This is what's being called into question by so many people today. Are we really okay? Am I okay and you're okay? Is that really the case? A number of celebrity voices right now are coming forward publicly and saying, you know what, we're not okay. And a lot of them are saying, I personally am not okay. We are collectively are not okay. And so that's really represents a change in perspective from what was advertised in the 1970s from pop psychology. Russell Brand here, one of the big celebrity baptisms he's been promoting. He has a very, very popular podcast. He's recommending that people pray the rosary, right? Very Catholic prayer. And he was just recently baptized, not Catholic, but baptized Christian. And this article from Breitbart quotes Russell Brand as saying, I need God or I cannot cope in this world, right? There's definitely an I'm not okay message to what Russell Brand has been saying, right? But he is saying that he can get okay. He's finding ways of getting okay, and he's finding that they're religious, that they're spiritual, and they're Christian. Another one is Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She's written several articles, she's done many interviews, and so every time she does an interview, and I've also done 3 or 4 podcasts on Ayaan, but she has described her own conversion from being a prominent new atheist to now confessing faith in Christianity. Quite a U-turn in her life, and she's talked about her own struggles with alcoholism, or at least I don't know if she said alcoholism, but with drinking and with some struggles with depression and even suicidal thoughts. So, and she turned to Christianity. And she gives, and if you've seen my other podcasts, I've talked about her story at length. But the general outline of it is very similar to Russell Brand's, right? I'm having difficulties coping in my own personal life, and I'm finding strength and nourishment from Christianity and from Jesus Christ. Ayaan's is very personally connected to Jesus Christ. She talks about how Jesus gave her a new introduction or a new perspective on God that was benevolent, and how that brought her to Christian faith, and how it's helping her as well. And so there is this common theme that we're seeing in Russell Brand and Ayaan Hirsi Ali that I've talked about over the course of this podcast series, which is that we are not okay without God. That is a very Orthodox Christian point of view. That's straight from the Bible, right? We are not okay without God, which is really a massive contradiction of 20th century popular culture. When you look at all the miracle stories in the gospel, yes, they certainly point to the divinity of Jesus, that he can do all these things. But, how many of his miracles are helping people, right? He makes blind people see. Blind people see. Lepers are healed of their leprosy. The deaf can hear. Crippled people can walk. He even raises the dead to life, right? He drives out demons. He feeds 5,000 people. And so, I mean, the message here, certainly the message is that Jesus Christ is divine. Jesus Christ is God. That's certainly a major theme. But the other theme is we're completely dependent on God, right? He feeds us. He takes care of us. Our health is entirely dependent on him. And in fact, in John 15, what does Jesus say? He says, he's the vine. We are the branches, which is the tree of life metaphor that I described in a previous podcast. And he says, without him, we can do nothing. That is clearly the message. This is the insight that Ayan has been having recently, and Russell Brand as well. That we can do nothing without God, that we depend on God. That's not a bad thing, right? That is the human condition. That is a major scriptural teaching about human nature, that we are vessels of God's Spirit, and that unless we are in communion with God and His Holy Spirit, we will be unhappy and unhealthy. So Ayan has been, very public about her conversion. And what happened a couple of months ago was somebody had the idea to get Ayan up on stage with Richard Dawkins, one of her very close friends from her New Atheist days, the very famous New Atheist Richard Dawkins, who recently himself came out and said, well, actually, even though I don't believe in all of the tenets of Christianity, nevertheless, I consider myself to be a cultural Christian, right? He thinks it is a benevolent religion, that it has done much good. It has had a tremendously positive impact on society, on culture, and civilization. Richard Dawkins is now openly agreeing with Ayan on those basic principles. Christianity seems to be a force for good. Where he differs, Ayan seems to think, well, if Christianity has been such a benevolent force for good, maybe that's because there is a chief benevolent force behind Christianity that is responsible for all that good. And Richard Dawkins doesn't accept that, right? He's still sticking stubbornly to his New Atheism. You couldn't, there's no basis for believing in a creator God who loves us. There's no proof for that. What's your evidence for that? You don't hold irrational beliefs, do you? Ayan is kind of what he's saying. You heard it all through the early 2000s, right? Religion makes extraordinary claims, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? They just don't have any evidence for their claims about the existence of God, so we have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Ayan is pushing back against that. She's saying, my coming to faith is more subjective. What I have been doing, and what I did in my first book, it's around here, what I did in my first book is I really did push the subjective point of view, and I was following John Paul's theology of the body in doing that. And that doesn't lead to moral relativism or subjectivism or anything remotely like that. It's sort of an object of subjectivity. I'm not going to get into all of that, but Ayan, what I want to say is Ayan's pushback to Richard Dawkins' insistence on, evidence and so forth and proof, I think is absolutely valid. It's absolutely scriptural. It's absolutely orthodox. And that's going to be a theme that I develop, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit here. You can follow along with the floating podcast next to me. But what I would say in agreement with Ayan is that not every question is meant to be studied scientifically, or at least not as rigorously as that. And there are important reasons for that. And I want you to kind of follow my train of thought here. So consider, as I'm just reading off of this slide here, consider that generations after their deaths, the theories of Darwin and Einstein are still being studied and tested, right? So, the theory of relativity, I believe Einstein died in 1955. That was quite a long time ago. You can see my gray beard. I was born 10 years later. So I'm an old man. He died even, a decade before I was even on this earth. So you know how long he's been gone. And it's still a theory. Relativity is still a theory. It's still being tested. It's still being studied. And Darwin, of course, is from the 19th century. And his theory is still a theory, still being studied, still being tested, and still being argued about. And so I would just, invite you to consider that if you spent that much time trying to figure out what to eat for dinner, well, you can figure out where that's going to lead, right? So clearly, with respect to our own lives, we don't have multiple lives to answer some big questions, right? There are questions that face us in this life, and we need answers to those questions while we are alive, or the questions cease any longer to be relevant, right? And so my response to the demand for proof that the new atheists insist on is that some questions are a little bit different. Urgent questions require timely answers. Okay? Ayaan Hirsi Ali is telling us that she was desperate. She was suicidal, right? And she's trying out Christianity. She thinks, maybe there's something there. Jesus, he sounds so good. Maybe there's something to it. It's not just that he's good. And not only is he good, but his teachings are good too. And look, 2,000 years later, look at the fruit of it. How can you deny the good fruit that came from this one man? Really, is he really just a man? What one man has had the kind of impact that Jesus Christ has had, right? And so maybe she can't prove every dot and tittle of the Christian creed, right? Neither can any Christian. No Christian can, right? But I guarantee you there are things that new atheists believe that they can't prove as well, right? Urgent questions require timely answers, right? And think about it. I mean, how should I live my life? Well, I need to be alive in order for that question to be relevant, and so I need an answer now. I can't study the question, how should I live my life for 50 years or 75 years, right? If we go on, but of course people will go on asking the question, how should I live my life, right, after I die? But I need an answer now, right? Where can I find happiness, right? Maybe I can't, maybe I don't have a proof for how to find happiness, right? Maybe I don't have extraordinary evidence. But, I'm going to go with the best information I have and the best information I can find, and I'm going to run with it because I want happiness now, not 10 years from now, and certainly not 100 years after I'm dead, right? So I'm going to seek happiness and pursue happiness now, whether or not I've got a foolproof, syllogism to prove, my philosophy of life, right? Urgent questions require timely answers. And I think that brings us back to Zariah. Zariah was a young woman who had urgent questions about how to live her life and about where to find happiness. And you know what? Her world failed her. Okay? Her world failed her. If only she had been given better answers to the questions that she was asking. And people in the comments box can argue with me about this, but I would say that her case is such a clear case of a person who had big questions, urgent questions, and they were never adequately answered for her. And so, not timely enough, not timely at all. And this is part of Ayan's response to Richard Dawkins, and she is spot on. She says, we have not protected people from the external forces that come for their hearts, minds, and souls. That's exactly right. That's, that is exactly what we can say about Zariah. And this is going to lead me into, the next segment here. Zariah is not the only one, right? I've reported on previous podcast shows that the CDC reported 2022 set a record in the United States for the most suicides in a year. I believe the number was 49,500, right? Most suicides in a single year recorded in 2022. Now take a look at these. Take a look at these headlines right here as well. I believe they both come from the same Pew Research, which shows, and I'll just read this one here from Israel 365 News, Americans identifying as Christian is at an all-time low, secularism is at an all-time high. And then here Pew Research gets a little bit more into the numbers. 3 in 10 U.S. adults are now religiously unaffiliated. So I've been making this point over and over again. We're seeing a coincidence of, and I'm arguing that it's not a coincidence. It's not merely a coincidence. We're seeing this. We're seeing that as America has become more secular, it has also become more depressed, more mentally ill, and more unhappy. And as I reported in previous episodes about Zariah, that Netherlands is one of the most secular countries in the world, and so it fits this pattern that we're seeing, that secularism seems to be very closely associated with depression, mental illness, and suicide. Let's take a look, and I got this from the Free Press. They gave a little. Now the author of the article is who writes for the Free Press, Rupa Subramanya, gave a brief summary of the kind of treatment that Zariah received in the Netherlands. It was 10 years of therapy, 33 rounds of electroconvulsive therapy, and at the end of all of this, her psychiatrist told her, "There's nothing more we can do for you. It's never going to get any better." And my response to that is the same as the response of people from all over the world, religious and not religious. There are, many people agree, you got to be kidding me, really? It's never going to get you. You can really say to a 28-year-old girl that it's never going to get any better, right? There's nothing more we can do for you. That's very hard to believe. But what you'll notice here is that she wasn't lacking for therapy from the academic, scientific field of psychiatry and psychology and all the modern, best tested practices of the psychological field, right? But what it overlooked was some of the latest research in just the past few years coming from the Harvard School of Public Health, which I talked about, I believe, in my first episode of Soul Science, which showed by this nurses study, this was published in 2016, that in fact there is a very strong link between suicide and leaving Christianity. And if you're interested, you can you can read the article. This is in Christianity Today, but the author of this article, Tyler Vanderweel, is the lead researcher at the Harvard School of Public Health, and he's also the author of the academic articles, the peer-reviewed articles where this research was originally published. So you can see it for yourself. The Christianity Today version is a popular version, easier to read, and they do a good job of summarizing the research. Let me read this quote to you from the Christianity Today article. And this is Tyler Vanderweel from Harvard writing. Our own research indicates that declining religious service attendance, and this is not new to you if you've been following my show, our own research indicates that declining religious service attendance accounts for about 40%, that's almost half, 40% of the rise in suicide rates over the past 15 years. If the declines in attendance could have been prevented, how many lives could have been saved? Clearly, the lead researcher at the Harvard School of Public Health is asserting a causal link between suicide and not going to church, okay? Between mental illness and leaving religion, specifically leaving Christianity, okay? This is the lead researcher from the Harvard School of Public Health based on their peer-reviewed study, okay? So let's kind of sum up what he said. He's saying basically that Christianity, according to their research, can cut the suicide epidemic in half, right? Christianity. And so the question I raise here, ask yourself this question: anything else? Can anything else do that? Believe me, if there was anything in academia, in the science of psychiatry or psychology, mental health therapy, that could be that successful, right? It would be plastered all over the news. Okay? You don't hear about the Harvard School of Public Health because it doesn't fit the narrative that is favored in the secular media, which is that Christianity is good for nothing, right? What we hear from the secular media is that Christianity is good for nothing and we're better off without it. But actually, science is showing something else, and we're talking about the very best science. We're talking about the Harvard School of Public Health. And by the way, this research has been replicated. If you read the Christianity Today article, I happen to have the physical copy right here. You read this article and you'll see he mentions that many studies have shown exactly the same thing. And in fact, Harvard has a whole school, is a branch of the medical school devoted specifically to the study of religion and its impact on mental health, as does Duke University Medical School and a number of other places. This is a very, very big, very new branch of mental health study in which doctors are taking very seriously the beneficial impact of religious practice. And so, I'm so happy for Russell Brand and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who, who've been very public about their own personal crises and their own suffering, and how turning to Christianity has given them answers to questions that have strengthened them. They feel strengthened, and they feel healed. They, in some ways, are adding to the miracle stories that you read about in the Bible, and that's wonderful. And I've also mentioned the wonderful book by Eric Metaxas, in which he says that the famous existentialist philosopher did the same thing. He was raised Catholic as a young French boy, but as he grew up, he became very famously an atheist and an existentialist. And he gave up that. But when he came to the end of his life, he came to the same point that Ayaan Hirsi Ali came to, and Russell Brand, which is that he couldn't find any meaning in life. And he returned to his faith at the very end of his life. embracing Christianity again. So the path of Russell Brand and the path of Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a well-trodden path, right? Some of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century walked this path before them in finding meaning in Christianity when before they had rejected it. St. Augustine, living in, was it the 4th century? I think it was the 4th century in which he lived. Think about how long ago that was. The heart is restless until it rests in thee, O Lord. So relevant to our discussion today. And Jesus, said famously in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 10, I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And so, as I said before, the miracle stories, certainly they teach us that Jesus is God, but they teach us more than that. They teach us how we so completely depend on God, right? The parable of the prodigal son, I'm giving you a little mini Bible study here. Go and look up the parable of the prodigal son. The father figure there is definitely, he's a metaphor for God, right? God, the loving father. And the prodigal son, he leaves his dad because he thinks he's going to have a better time. He's going to have a happy, wonderful life, partying with his friends away from his father. And of course, it doesn't end well, right? He realizes, he comes to a bad place and he realizes, I was better off with my father, and he returns home. And so, the story of the prodigal son is the story of Russell Brand. It's the story of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. It's the story of Jean-Paul Sartre. It's everyone's story, right? And it is a important implicit theme of this much discussed article in the Atlantic magazine, which is summed up by the subtitle here, article by Derek Thompson. Many Americans seem to have found no alternative method to building a sense of community, and I would say, and to finding happiness and satisfaction in life. That's correct. Many Americans, he's absolutely right about that. That religious decline has not paid off in America and Western society more generally, which brings us back to Zariah. If only somebody had given her, the same answer that Jean-Paul Sartre discovered in his own life, and Russell Brand discovered, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and so many people. And Zariah is not alone. As the CDC has reported, suicide is an epidemic, right? And the Harvard School of Public Health is telling us now that it's not a coincidence that this epidemic is hitting Western society at the same time that we have left religion. There seems to be a very, very strong connection there. And what you saw in Zariah's, in the what they tried for Zariah, it was all a therapeutic approach. There was no religion. There was no spirituality. They just assumed, that those things were silly. That it wasn't true at the beginning of the 20th century. And I've talked so much about Carl Jung and how he predicted in the early 20th century that eventually religious ministers would be replaced by psychotherapists, right? Because he said they were giving better answers to the questions that people had problems in their life, and they would go to a religious minister. But Jung was claiming that the minister was being replaced by the therapist because the therapist could do a better job. At the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, what we're seeing is it's exactly perhaps, let me suggest it gently, that perhaps we're seeing quite the opposite. Zariah Terbeek went to the therapist, and Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Russell Brand went to the minister, and I pray that they get better results. So that's my message for today. I will be continuing to hammer this away, and we'll have much more from Soul Science at Patheos. And I hope you'll join us next time. Take care.